this meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd all please rise with me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Next is the invocation, and if you'll all bow your head with me, I'll pray. Dear Lord, we'd like to thank you for the opportunity to come here tonight and gather on behalf of the town. We'd also like to ask for your blessing over this meeting, and we'd like to ask for your guidance and direction in the decisions we make. For it's in your name we pray. Amen. Amen. All right. Next item is the approval of the July 24th, 2023 Planning Board meeting minutes. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to review those.
Mr. Chair, I do want to make a note that it's just a small clerical administrative. We have June 24th, and I believe that should have been July 24th, if I'm mistaken. Okay. So just have a correction there, note that correction for July 24th.
All right. Any other corrections?
Mr. Chairman, here no further additions or corrections. I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to approve the minutes.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. All right, on to the regular agenda. First up is case MA 22-08, Harris Creek Farms rezoning request. Michael, is this you?
Thank you, sir. Planning Board. This is map amendment 22-08 for a project known as Harris Creek Farm. The majority property point address is 4928 Hoops. This is a rezoning for approximately 19 parcels, just over 90 acres. Change from Wake County R30 zoning district to the town of Rolesville mix of zoning districts, the residential medium density and the residential high density. And both of those districts are conditional zoning district requests. This is again all being reviewed under the newer, now 2 years old, not so new, land development. General site facility here. Large contiguous piece of property here, and then some smaller tracts of land in this facility here. Jonesville Road to the east, Mitchell Mill Road to the south, and out here in this scope, you can see where this road is elevation. Here, looking at the property assemblage on the future land use map, this entire area of town is identified as medium density residential, future land use. The existing zoning in this yellow shade here is that Wake County R30 zoning district. So what is being submitted for this is also an alternate annexation petition that the Board of Commissioners will determine NC3X also if they choose to approve this. So this land is in the jurisdiction, as is a large area. You see all of that yellow area, that's all.
In the gray is City of Raleigh?
Yes.
Okay.
The
And
jurisdiction is that gray to the west or plan left, and this property in pink is a project that was rezoned by the town and annexed by the town just a few months ago, 45109 Mitchell.
and just for clarification, the gray with the City of Raleigh, did you also categorize that zoning, or are you just representing that as gray? You didn't get into Raleigh's zoning
No,
breakdown for that area?
I don't believe the Raleigh zoning is turned off in this picture.
Okay, thank you.
Wake County's.
Okay, thank you.
Here is a snapshot of the two core building development standards sections for the two western districts. So you have R and medium density residential category on the left, and then the RH high density district on the right. And I guess come back to this if you'd like to. This is pictures of what those basic conventional standards are, things like setbacks, also detail out all of the recommended improvements from the traffic impact analysis that was done for this project. So it does kind of double down and commit to those in writing in the recommendations. Through the review of this, which went through 3 rounds of review by the technical review committee for the town, summary review is that the comprehensive plan does support the request of the 2 districts, as it does identify this entire area as medium density residential. The future land use map. This project is inherently bringing forth 2 types of residential dwelling units. So there is a mix of dwelling units, with lot sizes and type. The transportation plan and the traffic impacts, the outcomes of the TIA show that some improvements will be done to, sorry, these are the intersections and roadways that were studied in there. And then in the conditions of approval are details about those improvements that will need to be done. Majorly to Jonesville Road, since that is the closest large serving road to this development. Overall analysis is that the existing Wake County zoning and surrounding land use pattern are actually not consistent with the comprehensive plan. You have a lot of, again, larger lot, single-family residential in this area, or just undeveloped land, which does not meet that medium density residential future land use. The 2 types of dwelling units would fulfill the medium density residential prescription for that area. Densities, which are committed to both in the conditions and through the analysis of the land areas, it's hitting the staff memo. Those are consistent with the comprehensive plan and the LDO limitations of this, the densities. That, so they're coming in at under density for both zoning districts. And then the condition commitments do mitigate, or work to mitigate the impacts of the development, and then they provide some greater standards, such as that condition about providing building materials, typically the TCAP. The overall staff recommendation is approval of map amendment 2208, subject to the conditions in the concept plan to rezone this property. And staff is suggesting the proposed motion for the board to also recommend approval to the town board of commissioners. Tonight, we do have the TIA consultant here in the room, should there be questions about the TIA. And then the applicant does have a presentation to help you over.
All right, thank you. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Ellerbarger before we get to the applicant's presentation?
Yeah, just real quick, if I saw everything correctly, none of this is in the ETJ, just like the other previous property to the south, correct?
Wake County zoning, it's in Wake County's jurisdiction. Other questions?
No, at this point.
Good evening. Thank you, members of the planning board. My name is Sam McMorris. I'm an attorney at Longleaf Law Partners, here on behalf of the applicant and the development team. Joined this meeting by Steve George with the CSC Group, as well as Jeremy Keeney and Hannah Knight, with Morris and Ritchie Associates, who are the project engineers on the case. I appreciate Michael's thorough presentation, and I won't drag you back through it in more detail than we need, but I think I will kind of go back through a couple of items briefly here. So in short, we're seeking to rezone approximately 94 acres. I apologize for a slight discrepancy there. But approximately 94 acres of mostly vacant land, an assemblage that's currently designated as R30 under Wake County's zoning jurisdiction. We're seeking to rezone it into the town of Rolesville for the purposes of zoning for RM and RH CC zoning districts within the town of Rolesville's zoning jurisdiction. As you just heard, the property is located along Jonesville Road, with Harris Creek running along the bottom portion of the property. You also heard it's approximately 19 parcel assemblage, making up that nearly 100 acres total. Current zoning is R30 under Wake County. And for reference, there was a question earlier about Raleigh zoning. The slightly lighter orange there is R4 zoning under the city of Raleigh, which used to correlate to roughly 4 units per acre minimum, but since some recent text changes in the city of Raleigh actually allow higher density, 4 to 6 units per acre on average in that lighter yellow area. Here's the future land use map, where you can see that the property, of course, has that medium density residential that predominates this entire southern portion of the town of Rolesville's extraterritorial jurisdiction. And just a slight clarification that it is within the town of Rolesville's extraterritorial zoning jurisdiction. It is not within the town of Rolesville's current corporate municipal jurisdiction. And here is a look at the zoning and concept plan that is being proposed as part of this request. We are proposing 149 total units spread across nearly 100 acres of land. 68 of those units are proposed as detached single-family dwelling units, and 81 are proposed as attached townhouse units. The rezoning concept plan associated with this request totals overall to a density of approximately 1.6 units per acre and over 60 acres of open space. That's in addition to over a mile of new public greenway and numerous outdoor amenities such as gazebos, playgrounds, and dog park. The plan also includes a 25-foot minimum protective yard around all existing adjacent single-family homes. And that's in addition to the 15 to 20 foot setbacks that exist on those properties. So collectively, putting those in place to ensure that there's sufficient buffering between the existing single-family and the proposed development. As you heard, there's a number of voluntary rezoning conditions that have been submitted with this request. Conditions 1 through 3, where we just codify those density and total unit maximums that we just laid out. That being the 68 detached and 81 attached units, totaling approximately 1.6 units per acre total. Conditions 4 through 9 include those architectural aesthetic conditions that regulate the exterior materials to ensure that there's aesthetically pleasing development on the property. Condition number 10 covers those required recreational amenities, and condition 11 requires a certain percentage of the plants on the property be native North Carolina pollinator plants. And finally, condition 12 is a codification of the recommendations from the traffic impact analysis that was conducted by Rainham in association with this case. Sorry. And so there's a list of those recommendations from the TIA that Rainham did. And of course, we have a representative from Rainham here if you guys have any more specific questions about traffic counts and the traffic impact analysis associated with this case. With that, the development team is here to respectfully request the board's recommendation of approval on this case. We believe this is a fairly straightforward and a great development that meets a number of the town's adopted policies. First, there's a number of community benefits that we believe come with this project, including additional housing options in this area that currently don't exist, meaningful roadway improvements along Jonesville Road, as well as an entirely new public roadway network within the site, as well as over a mile of new public greenway on the site, which will help facilitate the development of the greenway network in this portion of the town. Also, as you heard, staff has found this request to be consistent overall with the town's adopted policies, specifically with the comprehensive plan, and has recommended approval, specifically concluding that it meets all subdivision regulations and transportation improvement requirements under the town's code. Staff also noted that the request commits the project to densities that are far less than the LDO's normal density limits for these particular zoning designations. Or, if you kind of run the theoretical by right subdivision potential under those zoning designations, we really do limit it to a far lower density than would normally be required, or allowed, I should say, under these zoning designations. And so therefore you have an overall density and an overall traffic potential that is much lower than your typical rezoning case that has 100 acres of property contained and that's including a number of recent cases that you all have seen that have been approved by the town in the past. Some of those having, higher densities, even though they're purely single-family developments. That's largely due to the large amount of open space that's being provided as part of this development. And therefore, we think, the development as proposed is complying with and furthers a number of the town's adopted policies regarding both increased housing types and conservation of open space. So for those reasons, we recommend, or we request that the board recommend approval. And again, we have the development team here to answer questions that you all have.
All right, thank you. Do any of the board members have any questions for Mr. Morris or the development
Yeah,
team?
before you get too comfortable there, just because you made a point to bring up the ETJ in the, can you clarify? I'm still learning some of this stuff, so can you clarify the difference? Because I understand zoning is one thing, but the ETJ is different. So the ETJ doesn't go all the way down to Mitchell Mill Road, but the zoning does.
The municipal jurisdiction, that which has been annexed, does not. So, see, my map is a little outdated. The uncolored portion along Jonesville Road there, that Michael's presentation has purple, that has now been annexed, right?
Yes, I'm familiar with that, right.
So that has been annexed into the municipal jurisdiction and is now part of the town of Rolesville.
Correct.
This map shows you the extraterritorial planning jurisdiction of the town of Rolesville. So the state of North Carolina gives you planning jurisdiction that extends beyond your actual municipal. So you're not providing services to this entire area.
Correct.
You're only providing services now to that little portion there, and if approved.
Correct.
This parcel as well. So if any project within the orange area were to propose a development of some kind, they would be subject to the town's planning regulations, to the LDO. So it gets a little.
Well, I thought that's what that brown border line up there is. I thought that's what represented the boundary, and we just happen to have a zoning layout that sweeps over much more than the area that the ETJ covers.
Excuse me, is a pointer available to him? Shelley? That's okay, is a pointer available to him? Is it up there?
And
So I thought the ETJ ended at that brown line and was north of that. But then the zoning, the comprehensive zoning, because if you look at the ETJ, the way it's set up on other things, that's where it ends. And then the actual zoning map that Rolesville created just goes wherever it wants to.
okay, yeah, I maybe have to defer to Michael on that one.
Okay.
I know that it is subject to the town of Rolesville's future land use.
That's all that is right, that's all that is. There's no legal tie to that. That's just Rolesville saying, hey, this is what we'd like to do out here. Is that correct? Am I right?
I believe, because that's something you can address, Mike.
I'm just trying to make sure I
Just make sure we're-
understand, because like I said, I'm still learning this stuff, so this is a good opportunity for me to hear what it, yeah.
My general understanding is that since we're coming to the town of Rolesville, it's mapped within their kind of future land use zoning jurisdiction.
Right.
I'll let Michael.
Thank you.
So the future land use map in the comprehensive plan dates 2017.
Right.
The town and city of Raleigh had an annexation agreement that set hard border
Right.
in this area of the world. And my understanding is what we see on IMAPs, or we're mapped here, is that hard border.
Right, Mitchell Mill Road, which is Mitchell Mill Road.
In Mitchell Mill Road.
Right.
North side of Mitchell Mill, eligible to come into the town of Rolesville.
Correct.
South, eligible to go into the city of Raleigh.
Correct.
But to my understanding, this property or all this area out here is not in the town's ETJ.
Correct.
at the moment.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure we all understood, because that's how I understood it as well.
And that's why its current zoning is
R30,
under
right.
County zoning, because even ETJ land is zoned under the town's LDO.
Right, yeah, that right, correct.
ETJ still has town zoning zoning district.
And that's why a town would look to create an ETJ and extend it so that they can have a little bit more of their hands in that stuff.
The town at least controls the zoning
Right.
district of that.
Right.
versus This,
So-
where you could have a hard
Okay.
time between town limits
All right.
and between county zoning district.
Right.
So that's one of the benefits of ETJ, I guess you could say. This is a piece of property that's jumping directly from Wake County's authority voluntarily into the town of Rolesville.
Right. Thank you.
Skipping that ETJ.
Thank you. Thought I had that right.
It's a big property.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Morris or the development team? If not, we do have one public member who signed up to speak. I'd like to give him an opportunity. Mr. Jones?
Good evening. Guy Jones, 4706 Pleasant Street.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. Like I said, my name is Guy Jones. I live at 4706 Pleasant Lane. I live in Jonesville, so this project hits close to my heart. My property, like most in Jonesville, this project goes flat outside of Road ETJ. I would love to share some of Jonesville history, but I intend to respect this institute's established timing of other countries. However, I do hope that you understand and appreciate just how important the Jonesville community is to me and my family. So much more important than any amount of tax dollars the town might receive from the home spirit of this plan, and most certainly more than the profits the developer will leave town with when they're done. But emotions do not account for much in government systems. You've got to follow policies and laws and rules that have been established. So again, I'll skip the history lesson and get right to the facts about this zoning request. This request is more than unreasonable. It is biased. Whether conscious or not, it negatively affects the families of Jonesville. This request is biased because the only one to benefit from it is the developer. Spare me the tax revenue argument. But we all know not a soul in Jonesville will see a penny of that revenue. There are already over 3,000 new rooftops coming to Rolesville with all the development you see it right now. Rolesville is already known as one of the fastest growing towns in North Carolina. At this point, I just had those maps out. Just take a look at the map. This is Jonesville's future. Look at the map and understand exactly what is happening here. To the north and east of Jonesville is Rolesville. The bypass came along and added a physical divide to a historic racial divide. So from the perspective of many Jonesville families, whether you are aware of it or not, this project will push you away yet again. Now look at the Mitchell Mill project and look at the Harris Creek Farm project. See how Rolesville is surrounding us? This is the beginning of rural gentrification. Well, the new developments to the south and east of us will produce homes that start at no less than 300,000, most likely to 400 to 500,000 by the time they're built. The property tax on those houses will increase the property tax of everything around them, like Jonesville. That means, without doing a thing except living our lives as we have for generations, the property tax on my house and everyone in my community will skyrocket. They will escalate to a point where owners can't afford to live there. Families don't want to abandon their ancestral homes, so they find ways to save them, to keep what their enslaved ancestors' blood earned. So they skip an electric bill, then a car payment, then a house payment. Ultimately, this financial strain presents families with two choices: sale or the foreclosure, or face foreclosure. This is when the developers swoop in like vultures, picking up property cheaply and smiling all the way to the bank, like they are as we speak. Meanwhile, all the history, all the sentimental value of generations of families wiped out without a blink of a developer's eye, and without the majority of you being aware of it, mainly because it does not affect you. That, boys and men, is the start of rural gentrification. But here's what's wrong with the zoning request as it pertains to how the system sees things. The land in question is currently governed by Wake County ordinance, which allows for only 1.47 houses per acre, as it has for decades. This zoning request would change that to allow more than 6 times the density of nearly 9 houses per acre. Would you want that in your community? Rolesville has rules that say projects need to be in like and kind of the surrounding properties. This request would destroy that principle. That alone should want to know though. Consider this: if the developer were allowed to build on these properties under the Wake County ordinance, they would only be able to build about 35 houses. Vote yes to this request to permit them, as shown in their plan, to build 149 houses, more than 4 times the amount currently permitted. 4 times. But they're selling you on 4 times better than 6 because this is not as the developer would be permitted to build. But what is the developer aim? Profit. Therefore, building 149 houses rather than 35 would benefit them and them alone. Frankly put, this developer is leaving you. They are using your ordinance because the county simply doesn't allow them to profit they desire. This developer will come in, build 150 houses, reap his profit, then vanish. It's that simple. The developer will use the Mitchellville project a little further south as an example that they are building of. Well, that project is a mistake too, for all the same reasons. Don't make the same mistake twice. Because this project isn't in the ETJ. It should be offered to town something extraordinary, but it fails to do so. There's no public farm. This is no commercial entity, and there's nothing that improves the quality of life of its neighbors. As explained, it does quite the opposite. So voting yes to this latest zoning change seals the fate of Jonesville, a community that has continually been ignored and pushed aside. I pray on the behalf of the 147 property owners in Jonesville that you deny this request. Should you be compelled to put it up for a vote, table it, so the Rolesville and Jonesville communities can work together for its mutual benefits. We wish to be heard again. I ask, would you want this to happen to your community? Hear us a vote no. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Jones before he sits down?
No.
All right. Any other questions for the development team or staff? If not-
I've got several, but I don't know if they're even warranted at this point. I mean,
I think this is our opportunity, if either ask questions or have some discussion.
well, I mean, based on that, based on that and some of the things that I had kind of sitting here too, I mean, I'm not personally ready to vote on this based on some of the comments I have. So, I mean, I'll share the stuff that I have, but if we're not even going to go that far, then, you know, I don't know what you guys want to do.
So go ahead and bring up what you're looking at.
All right, well, for this developer's sake, I'll bring up some of the things that I've noted. If you're familiar with any of the recent town board meetings, in the general philosophy that the town's been trying to get through, trying to make a rather walkable community. This particular property isn't remotely close to anything walkable. There are no sidewalks, there's nothing connecting anything to the north toward the town. So my concern about walkability is there. There's no commercial element, which was brought up already. That's a little bit concerning as well, given the location and the disconnect that this particular area has with the majority of the Rolesville community at present. And I know what's the other thing I have here? I couldn't make out a couple things that were in the plan, so maybe you guys can speak to the points, but I couldn't determine whether or not the greenway was just listed as an easement or if it was actually going to be installed. I couldn't make that out. I know that's a rather important thing. I spent 6 years on the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, so I spent a lot of time working on that greenway network, and I'd hate to see an easement put in place without something actually being constructed. So I'd like some clarification on that. I also saw that you only offered a virtual meeting for the neighborhood meeting, and half of the people that called in were only noted by phone numbers. I don't know if there was any attempt to identify who those people were to confirm that they were indeed residents of the surrounding area. The phone numbers were listed on your in your packet, but doesn't seem to be any attempt to identify who those individuals were. So I don't know who those people were, and they could be legitimate residents, they could be your friends, I don't know who they are. So I think that's a little bit helpful to make sure we understand who was being present during that meeting. As far as the conditions themselves, I've got a few that I would certainly want to consider on this particular project if it were even to move forward. I can tell you now I'm not really particularly in support of it, just like I wasn't in support of some of the other properties that came in, including Mitchell Mill and Hills of Harris Creek. I don't think it's the right time for Rolesville right now to be looking that far outside of our ETJ. But since I may be in the majority of that, the kinds of conditions I would like to see to make this thing even remotely work for some part of the back of my head were to make sure those those greenways are installed. I would like to see all the open space that is associated with this project be dedicated as a public park and not just a private part of an HOA that only that neighborhood can access. I think I think it's, what is it, something like 30 some odd acres that would be open. All that should be dedicated to the town for a park. And in order to do that, based on the way the town likes to do things, that park would have to be publicly accessible by a public street, whether that be Jonesville or another public street, Jonesville Road, that is. So one idea to make this feasible based on the plan that you've presented is one of the entranceways that you have coming off of Jonesville Road. I would suggest lots 83 to 87 be turned into public parking so that it could access that park, which would be directly to the south. Then from that location, the greenway, an additional greenway would be added from that parking lot along the wetlands to go to Lot 4 on this particular plan, which is the location of the greenway that extends across the swamp and the Harris Creek to the southern border in the southern area of this property that is otherwise open space. So that would be my first preference for a condition for this. If for whatever reason, because I'm asking in that respect to get rid of a couple pieces of property, if you don't want to do that because of what that does to your bottom line, then I would suggest going along Universal Drive. There is a stormwater containment system that you've got up there labeled SCM1. And I would suggest turning that into that same public parking lot because there is a greenway already up there based on your plan. And then move that stormwater management parcel to be behind lots 22 through 29. And that would be an alternative to that. I noticed in your meeting notes that a resident did ask about paving Universal Drive, which wasn't part of your plan. So that would be something that would be different with my request of this condition, should you choose this particular location for the public access to the public land that, again, I would put as your condition to your project. You know, other than that, the only other thing that would, again, change my mind a little bit is to be asking for a conservation subdivision. Because of this property, the location, the proximity to the swamp, the creek, and all that kind of stuff, I think the conservation subdivision development ordinance that we have is more appropriate. I understand it's not going to give you 149 homes, but it'll give you more than 35. So that's my feedback on this particular project, and based on what I collected and what I found. So I don't know if there's anything you want to ask or respond to in that respect.
I had one question from Michael based on a couple of things you said. Did Parks and Recreation give any comment as to whether they would like to see these open space areas as public or private areas, or do they have a preference?
That topic never came up, as far as that. I will clarify, in the exhibit with the red and the green district boundaries, in there it is calling out to build the greenway within those easements.
Okay.
So both the easements on the south side.
Right.
And then the trail that's a little more definitive looking drawn, that goes all behind the home. So all of that is showing is done.
Okay, thank you.
It's an easement. It's-
Okay, good, thank you. Thank you for locating that.
Parks, made lots of comments.
And greenway trails are typically built as part of the subdivision design.
Today, yes.
Yeah.
Past it, it's just the easement.
Yeah.
Most of the greenway areas and subdivisions have been approved recently. Have there been many public or are they private? What's the mix on those? Or do you know right offhand?
Parks,
Or open space areas? Are they dedicated as public or?
no. You remember Pierce Farm rezoning, a lot of discussion about that 3 to 5 acre area, closer to Burlington Mills, that was going to be dedicated as a park, and that ultimately came to fruition. So that was Parkland, and the Parks Department definitely vetted that, the ability to take it on, amenitize it, et cetera. I don't know what they'd say, 30 acres of largely undevelopable, it's basically passive open space there.
It's conservation. I mean, it's a conservation with the greenway going through it, but I'm more concerned about public access and not private access is what,
Well, what came to mind was public access easements over the area to get to that point of the public can get in there, which is just being blocked in, for the private amenity, I think that's a topic that the developer can look into, just granting access. Allow the public to get into there and enjoy the nature. But, Park Department has to heavily vet taking on 30 more acres of land obligation, even though most of it is, they would have to program it.
there'd be, yeah, there is no overhead for a conservation like that if you're not going to be able to develop or do anything on it. So it's minimal.
There would be some, I'm assuming, maintenance to the trails at that point in time.
That'll come no matter what, yeah. That'll come with or without that. Yeah. Yep.
Plus all the other things that come with large pieces of property like that would be the
All right.
I think I'm in agreement that the lack of walkability is concerning to me without sidewalks. And on your voluntary conditions, the 18 inches above grade with only 10 inches of some sort of masonry treatment, and then the vinyl siding, and just 2 types of finishes, it's not really enough detail for me to really understand what that is. But if you're going to have masonry, I'd like to see it all the way on the whole front, not just 10 inches.
Any other comments or discussion? Hearing no further discussion, I guess the floor is open for a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Actually, I think the applicant would like to make one comment before we make this motion.
We're happy to just address the issues that were brought up. Is the virtual meeting, I think we'd say that historically we get a lot more accessible to the public, and the plan also has a connection, if you see, kind of, right here. So this is a publicly accessible right connection to with a parking area. So there is current public access to the proposed greenway, and with regards to dedicating the kind of balance of the entire open space to the town, yeah, we think there's certain issues involved with the town may likely not particularly interested in yet taking on this large of an amount of just a kind of unusable wetland, to take on ownership and maintenance responsibilities for that. Again, we're open to it, but not sure what that would look like for the town. I know the city of Raleigh generally not willing to just take on large swaths of open space as public parks unless it can be owned, maintained, insured, amenitized, et cetera, like Michael said. Most of which this is not really capable of, is more of kind of an environmental open space as opposed to an amenitized public park, which we do think has major environmental benefits. So we addressed that. And then regarding commercial, to reiterate that this is a medium-scale residential future land use map designation. It doesn't call for commercial in this area. It calls for a mix of single-family and townhouses between 1 and 5 units an acre, and we proposed a mix of single-family and townhouses at 1.6 units per acre. Happy to take any other questions. Oh yeah, final one. We will be doing roadway improvements and providing sidewalks on the entirety of our frontage. We understand that.
Road,
Yeah, and internal road networks.
I have a question about the roadways. And I know we're early into this. The questions was as far as the north and southbound Jonesville, is there going to be a turning lane into that subdivision? Is that something that's planned? I didn't see it on the rendering, but again, we are very early into this process. Is there going to be a turning?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
Brian will maybe be able to explain in further detail. And just to clarify, you're talking about the site access along
The only site access that you have, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Mhm.
We believe there's a stop sign and access lanes in that as well.
Okay.
I'll flip back to, I believe it would be, maybe it's not included there, but.
I may have overlooked it, but I didn't see a rendering of it, so this is why I'm just asking, just for my edification, if there's going to be turning lanes, because there will be a traffic
There is.
situation with this.
There's egress and
So wait, was there
egress.
only one way in and out of this?
One way in and out, it looks like. It would be nice to have two, but it's going to be a traffic situation here. Just curious.
Ronald Stevenson. with,
Stevenson.
Raymond Kemp Associates. We prepared the traffic study. I was looking through the voluntary conditions, and I did not see that listed. However, the NCDOT has reviewed the traffic study, and NCDOT had a requirement for a turn lane at the entrance. So even though it may not be listed as a condition, it's something that DOT is looking at and looking for to be done.
Right, we just don't want to impede traffic. That's the first thing I see
Correct.
as development starts to come up on a road is not used to a lot of traffic. I just want to be mindful of the future, the current residents that are there. I do have another question, if you're the right person, it's Mr. Stevenson. As far as the traffic lanes in the subdivision, I noticed that they're 11 feet. Again, I know we're early, but I'm just curious. Are you tied to that number? So that's a total of 22 feet altogether. If the owner is here, if they want to talk about that, that's fine. Or applicant is here and talk about it, that's fine. But are you tied to that 11 feet?
Well, I'll let them address maybe the specifics of it, but what I can say is that 11 feet for 11-foot lanes on those kind of streets are typically adequate,
Yeah.
to carry that kind of traffic.
I thought you'd say that. That's perfectly fine. For the density that you're bringing into this community, and again, this is a suggestion, recommendation, thought. I may turn it into a condition, maybe. But for the type of density that you're looking for, Those streets, in my opinion, that's 22 across total. I would recommend expanding it to 30. Again, I can't ask you to do that or your team to do that, but it's something to just consider. Here's why. The cluster homes that we're putting into these subdivisions, again, you're bringing a lot of population in there. It's going to create a traffic nightmare. The way it is right now, and I did measure this in my subdivision, my subdivision is 20 across. You can barely get a utility truck and a Amazon delivery truck side by side. Now, what I'd like to see, as most of my colleagues here and should know about me, is that safety, health, and well-being of our Rolesville residents and community are my number one. I want to be able to get an aerial ladder fire truck through that neighborhood with ease. If those streets are that tight, I'm going to have a problem with it, because you're going to have people, and trust me, accidents will happen. It's not if, it's when. So I just want to make sure that we're pointing out the design going forward. Again, there's a recommendation, a suggestion that we do widen those streets. Right now, oh, one more thing I did have is, where are the trash cans going to go? Are they frontage? On the front?
I'll let these guys address that a little
I know I'm
bit
early, I'm
more.
sorry.
Yeah,
I just
no, that's
want
fine.
to
but-
vision I want to see the vision for this.
Yeah,
this
I
map.
may let the developers team kind of
Let's do it.
discuss some of those details. See
Let's
if
do it.
They have answers for that.
Let's do it. May I add some more while you're deliberating? I want to make sure this community is going to be beautiful. It's not sloppy. It's going to be well thought out. So introduce yourself, sir.
My name is Steve George. I'm with the CSC Group. I just wanted to.
Sure.
Actually, we were talking back there about the trash can thing. I guess I would ask the town, how is the town set up for trash cans?
So you don't know? Okay.
Is the question, each residence roll out carts?
Roll out carts. Yes, that's what I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I believe that's the standard.
That's the standard.
Yes. that
Yeah,
every resident
those
will
carts.
be issued
Okay, that helps.
trash and one recycle bin, usually the 96 gallon.
I gotcha. Mr. George, as I said, I'm going to allow you to answer that. The reason why I'm asking these questions is because I've driven through some very tiny streets. You see trash cans, you're dodging them. You see cars, you're dodging them. So that was a little concern for me, of course. Everyone here has their own opinions about things, but when it comes to safety, well-being, and the health of our community, that's what matters to me most. So what is your vision for this community? What is your vision?
Well, we think it's very well designed. And again, we meet all the requirements. The 11-foot wide, 22-foot wide total street is very, very typical in a subdivision like this, with the traffic that'll generate.
Yeah.
I live in a community like this, quite frankly. It is not an issue. And we have the trash cans too, we put out on the curb, not in the street, but on the curb type thing, and it works fine, yeah. So that's why, I mean, I understand your concern, and it's a concern for us too, yeah. But I don't see that as being an issue based on the history of the communities that we have built.
Okay. Going back to that, and then I'll sign off. Are you tied to that 11 feet? Would you expand that to 15? Anyone can help? I'm just asking. I'm just asking. It's not a condition, it's just a suggestion. I'm just asking.
We would think 15 would be excessive.
It would be aggressive, egregious?
Excessive, yes.
Oh, okay. All right.
Not egregious, no, not at all. I mean, again, you know, bigger is better, I guess.
Right,
but-
wider is
but in
better, it
terms
makes
of-
it look nicer. I think it just gives you that nice community feel rather than these dodging obstacles on a street. But
I believe the town has some standards for.
We probably
for traffic
do.
widths and what.
We do.
Establishes them. And usually with the extra wide streets, you're asking for, you're allowing more impervious surfaces, more
Mm-hmm.
runoff, and more maintenance.
I understand
frankly.
that. That's a good call out.
My name is Jeremy Keeney. I'm with Morrison
Hi,
Ridge.
Jeremy.
We're the engineers on the project. I will add that the standard cross-section detail of the road was taken directly from the town of Rolesville
Yep.
standards.
I understand that. The reason why I'm questioning it is because we're starting to see these cluster homes now pop up. They're becoming very popular. I've yet to see one here in Rolesville. I hope, do we have a cluster home community somewhere? I hope we, not yet,
It's a
it's
cluster
coming.
subdivision.
A cluster subdivision. So what I want to see is wider streets. That's just my opinion. I'm sure that's going to, again, I know what the requirements are, I know what's the minimum setbacks are, things like that, but if that's something that you're open to, you know, I'm all ears.
Okay.
It's a suggestion, not a condition, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay. I also wanted to address what both of us here, the whole sidewalk thing, the connectivity that we're bringing up. I just want to clarify, it sounded like there was some confusion about whether there were sidewalks on these streets.
I saw sidewalks.
There are sidewalks on all the streets, and plus the mile-long greenway that we've provided also. And again, just want to clarify, the greenway is open to the public. The public has access to the greenway. There's a parking lot there where it has an access point. We've provided that to the entire greenway system.
Okay.
Okay.
So
there is
the
a
public
lot
has,
of-
so the public has to drive into the neighborhood to access the public parking lot, to access the public greenway, as opposed to just being able to stay outside the neighborhood.
The other thing too to add would be that this greenway connects to additional greenway through the subdivision to the south. That's part of the town's
That hasn't been built
long
yet, but
range.
yeah.
Right. It's being mandated just like what we're doing is being mandated.
Right.
So, you know, it's portion of that will connect a much further stretch along Harris Creek, even beyond our property limits.
I'm very familiar with that. I worked on that for 6 years. I'm very familiar with that. I don't mean to, you know, any disrespect. My concern is having the public come into a community. It's one of the things that our former Parks and Recreation Director was very adamant about, and it's kind of set a precedence where we don't want the public, the general public, to have to go into somebody else's community in order to access a public amenity. That's the crux of the issue with where your parking lot is versus how accessible it is. Whether it's the people of Jonesville or the people of Wake Forest or the people of Knightdale, if they want to come in and use our greenway, which they do, they come to our facilities for a lot of different reasons. We want, for the sake of safety and all those other, we want our communities to be their communities and the public to be the public access. So having somebody come all the way into the neighborhood just to access something publicly, just it doesn't make sense to me when you have the opportunity to put something on the perimeter of the property where the public doesn't have to come into somebody's neighborhood in order to access an amenity. That's why I propose what I did with respect to the location of a parking lot that makes more sense for public access. And for sidewalks, I'm not talking about sidewalks on the inside of the community because those are required. But if you go back to one of your maps, you're looking at maybe, 200 or 300 feet of sidewalk on Jonesville Road because you only have one entranceway off of Jonesville Road. And the majority of your sidewalk that's on Jonesville Road goes to the south toward the bridge. It barely goes up to Mr. Austin's property right just to the north of that. So as far as connectivity, that's what I see. How is this neighborhood not connecting to itself, but how does it connect to the rest of the community? And the Greenway is one when it eventually gets built out, but 100, 200 feet of sidewalk along Jonesville Road doesn't cut it. But I also understand that that's not within the purview of your project because that's not your property. But that's part of what I have a problem with not talking to the community enough to understand or have an opportunity to talk to the community more, because maybe some of those property owners would be open to you putting a sidewalk in to make things a little bit more accessible to people bordering your neighborhood. That's what I'm at least looking for from people who want to come to Rolesville and be a part of Rolesville and not just build in Rolesville and leave.
Okay, well, because I was going to point out, just what you pointed out at the end there, that we're putting in the sidewalk where we can. We can't put it on somebody else's property.
Unless you have a conversation with them and
Right.
ask them, and that's
Right.
part of what my point is.
Okay. if we have no problem talking to that owner to the north and taking it all the way up to Universal Drive. We'll put the sidewalk in, if they will allow us to put it.
Okay, fair enough.
We commit to that.
I guess my question is about the notice list. I'm looking through this. How many residents in the surrounding area were invited? Because as I look through this, a lot of these are listed as Kenneth Investment. So that's the property owner. That's not necessarily representative of the neighbors or the people who live in the community.
Who invited them?
Right, I believe that Kenneth Investment is an owner of some of the subject properties. Can you clarify the question? I apologize.
So who exactly was this meeting notice sent to? How many residents in the surrounding area were actually invited?
I believe they were just sent to the addresses listed for each property owner, so the owner of the property.
No, I understand that,
Right.
but which owners? So I guess my question to the gentleman was here, did you receive the notification for that meeting? That's my question. The people in that surrounding area of Jonesville, were they invited to this meeting?
Yes, every property owner that fell within the, I believe, 500-foot radius.
That's what I wanted to ask.
Yes,
That's what I-
every single property owner within the 500-foot radius was sent a letter via the U.S. Postal Service.
Was there consideration in widening that 500, even though that's your requirement? Was there any consideration of widening that to speak to the residents of Jonesville?
I'm not sure if there was any consideration. We sent it, the town has a standard notice
Understood.
list, yes, and so we generate it based on them. I can't quite remember if it was us or the town that generated that list, but it's a calculation that's run through the geographical information system process. The notice radius is put in and it spits out the kind of almost ready to print envelopes.
Okay.
So, yeah, we just followed that 500-foot standard, yes.
I don't have any other questions, Mr. Chairman.
All right, anyone else have anything? I just had one question for the attorney. Some of the recommendations that were made, as a part of a rezoning request, the applicant would have to accept those and
Right.
make them himself. Is that correct?
The applicant will, if they would like to move forward with any of the conditions, they will need to voluntarily state, and I think that they have accepted a couple as they were standing here, but we'll need to make sure that we get clarification on what those are.
Okay, all right, thank you. Guess if there's no other discussion,
What conditions are you willing to add on based on that feedback? What conditions have you noted here today that you're willing to accept?
Well, we'll definitely talk to the owner about the sidewalk going up Rolesville Road, for sure. If that is something that you would like to see, and if they would allow us to do it, we would extend a sidewalk up to Universal.
Okay.
We'll do that. I don't know if there's anything else.
Mine was not a condition.
Right.
It was just a recommendation. It's up to you to go further with that. I'll leave it to you as far as what your visions are for the community. So it's not a condition. It's just a recommendation or a suggestion to see if that's something you would be interested in.
Yeah, I think, if I could just say, a lot of the things I'm hearing here, we have met or exceeded everything that has been asked by the town, okay, in terms of the regulations, how we did it, who we sent the notifications to. We've done everything per what we were told we were supposed to do. I'm hearing a lot of that you'd like it done differently, and we get that. We'd like to hear that ahead of time. If you want us to do something differently, we'll do it differently. But we've met everything. The staff has said they like the project, that they approved, that they approved the project the way it's designed. That's what we did. So I guess I'm a little taken aback here that it's like we didn't do something we're supposed to do. We did everything asked of us. We think it's a great project. It's designed the way that it's supposed to be designed, meets every regulation out there. We met everything or exceeds it.
Right. You're right, absolutely, Mr. George, right?
Yes.
Yes. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. I've never seen a product like this before.
No, I understand.
I've never seen a product like this before. I'm thinking ahead. And again, coming back to safety, health, and well-being of our community and our residents. That's where I'm coming from. And that's where I've always taken a stance on. So again, you did everything right. You're absolutely right. This is why I didn't make it a conditional as far as how I'm voting today. I wanted it to be just a recommendation, a suggestion. Would you widen those streets for this tightly dense community? That's it. That's it. Yeah, or maybe even just something just to make it a little bit wide. I've seen beautiful communities with wide street. It just looks so appealing. These tight streets, it just looks like a maze. That's all. That's it.
And I'll respond to the comment too that you've made, because again, you're absolutely right. You have done everything by the way things are written and by the way things are laid out and by the way they're designed for you to follow. And the staff very well may have provided their opinion and their approval and their guidance the way they see it. But part of what at least I understand my job to do up here is to look at things differently, look at things from a more long-term perspective, and moving from a very low-density situation to an extremely high-density situation, I think is not good for the long term right now. Now, maybe in 15, 20 years, this would be a perfect project because of the way growth goes. I just think the timing of it is not good for Rolesville. I don't think the location of it relative to everything else that Rolesville is doing it's just not in the right place in the right time right now for what I see. And I see a lot of the potential of what it could do, both positive and negative. And so sometimes the reason why there might be a disconnect between what a staff member or a town commissioner or planning board member might have is because of our own different experiences and our own different understanding of what we can see differently from our perspective relative to the future. And I don't see this being a positive impact on the future for anything in that area or Rolesville right now. Just as I said no to Hills of Harris Creek, and if I was on the board, I would have said no to Mitchell Mill, because those are outside our planning area. We haven't planned for it. We haven't thought about how we're going to connect to all of that. When I was sitting on the Parks and Greenway system looking at the greenways, we had no idea how to connect Hills of Harris Creek to the Greenway system, because we have to go through 17 different private properties just to make them connect, because it's not part of what we were planning for, because it wasn't within that area and jurisdiction of where we were paying attention to. So that's where you have this variety of opinions, because you're talking about area that no one's been thinking about. Okay, when you come into the ETJ, or you come into the areas nestled within Rolesville that aren't incorporated, that's a lot easier to have conversations about what works and what doesn't work. But you're outside of everything that Rolesville has even been thinking about. So that's why you're experiencing, at least in my opinion, that's what I think you're experiencing, what you're experiencing, a difference of opinion from staff members, from 5 or 6 different board members, maybe from your staff, your own staff itself. I think that's where that comes from, is because you're in an area that is not being, it hasn't been looked at specifically for how somebody wants to do something with it.
No, and I appreciate that, yeah. I guess from our standpoint, we are right across the street from a project you just approved, which is coming into Rolesville.
And with all due respect, if that project was done, it could be a different story, but with the economy and the price of everything still the way it is, out of control, that developer can go belly up and we would have nothing. So we wouldn't have a connecting greenway. We wouldn't have a walkable commercial entity. Again, we could roll our eyes at a lot of different things, but that is a possibility. I don't want it to happen, but I have to sit up here and think of that as a possibility. And to me, that is a possibility, because I see projects right down the road. There's been a 2-story or two-car garage unit for Hoffman Auto Sales that's been vacant, halfway built since the beginning of COVID. So what's to say that's not going to happen to the Mitchell Mill project, and we're never going to get a commercial entity, we're never going to get a greenway, we're going to never get anything, and then you're going to be this community just hovering in the middle of nowhere. So I have to think about those things because that's what my role is up here.
I understand that. And I guess what I'm saying though, but if we come in and we do this, we provide greenways, sidewalk, we provide connectivity. Like you say, does it go anywhere right now? No, but it will connect to somebody somewhere down the line.
Right.
It's improvements to the roads, it's improvements to you know, the park area, whatever like that. That's all, that sort of thing is there so that when everything grows to it, at some point, and I think you'd have to admit it's going to happen, okay? When it grows to it, it's there, and it improves the area in general. It's my opinion, okay? In that, yeah, I understand what you're saying, it's sitting out there now, but with everything that you have approved and everything that's moving toward it, and over the next 5 years with all the growth that's coming to Rolesville, it will provide services and connectivity that you want there at some point. And it has diversity of product. I understand the townhome issue you were talking about, but that's what our buyers are looking for. They're looking for diverse product. They're looking for that type thing. And it's actually, in our opinion, a good thing, okay, for the community to have that diversity. Again, we see this as, and the density isn't that, for a 100-acre piece, density is not that high. Okay,
The density is high for how much you can develop. You can only develop on 32 acres.
Sure.
That's why you're asking for cluster medium density and why you're asking for high density in an area 3 miles from downtown Rolesville. That's really, again, that's more what my worry is, which is why my suggestion would be to look at the conservation development ordinance. I don't have a problem with development. I just don't like this kind of density where this is in respect to everything else that is around it. That's the core of what my issue is with the way this is presented.
Understand.
You're going high density from R30.
But the concept of cluster development is so that you have the 60 acres sitting there untouched.
Because you can't touch it, so it's a compensation for not being able to develop on that land. I understand how it all works. That's the whole purpose of clusters, to say, hey, I can't develop over here, so let's work on something that still allows me to put something. I get it. I understand what that all is. We can, you know, word it however we want to make it look favorable one way or another. You're going to say it's favorable for us because of the way you're presenting it, and I'm going to say you're making it favorable for you because of what I just said, because you can't develop on that land, so you have to go to cluster in order to get the maximum number of houses. And so this idea of cluster is designed for both of those to be satisfied. I get that. I totally get that.
Okay.
You know, so I understand that 100%. I still think it's wrong where it is relative to everything else that's going on in Rolesville.
No, I get that. And I appreciate the conversation. It's a good conversation, actually.
Absolutely,
I think.
absolutely.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I just want to make sure you guys, I mean, we designed this for the best use of the property. We think very
For the
strong-
maximum
Okay.
use of how many rooftops you can put on to, yeah, absolutely. You maximize that.
Best use of the property, yeah.
Well, okay, that's subjective. I mean,
Yeah.
best is subjective. So, because in my opinion, it's not the best use, and that's,
Understand.
you know, yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
I think we can agree on that part, you know? I mean, yeah.
Well, I haven't said a whole lot, but I personally think it's not a bad plan for the area. I think that we have, you mentioned that this area hadn't been looked at before, but the town has adopted a long-range land use plan that did identify this area as more of a medium density. So the town has looked at some forethought of how it should be developed, and I think we've sort of set a precedence with what was approved to the south, and that's been already approved by the town board.
Well, right, but just because you start your way into one thing doesn't mean you keep going. You know, I mean, if you start to get your front tire stuck in the mud, do you just hammer it and keep going, or do you reassess yourself and be like, well, wait a second, maybe we should do something. Maybe we should do something different. Maybe we should look at this
I
differently.
guess that's where the opinion comes in.
Exactly, yeah, yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Any other discussion? Not, the floor is open.
Bill was gonna make a motion earlier.
If there's not a motion, I'd suggest we at least table it.
Well, do we have some goals or something you'd like to see if we're tabling it, other than just seeing the same plan again in a month?
I think there's a lot to digest from today's meeting, including the public comments. I mean, I think if nothing else, they should reach out to the community a little bit more and figure out if there's anything else they can do to you know, make the project a little bit more amenable to the residents.
All right.
I still feel strongly about public access not being something that's buried inside the community, so I think they could take some time to look at the layout of how they want to put property, you know, put the lots in there to make that parking lot more on the outside perimeter so that the public doesn't have to invade the community space in order to use the public amenities. So, I mean, I think that's something that is reasonable to ask them to do in this time period of it being tabled.
All right.
Unless there is somebody who wants to make a motion, but I think those are at least two big things that could be considered in that time period.
We can, if the applicant would like to consider and come back, we can certainly consider that. Or, yes.
Where does this go after this? Yeah, let's say we do table this. Where does this go? Does it go before the commissioner? Or they come back?
Sure. The natural pathway after your recommendation this evening would be the October 5th town board. This is August, skipped September, right? So about
Okay.
5 weeks from now. That would be its natural pathway. After your
I'm sorry,
recommendation.
to the town board or back to planning?
No, town board.
Why not back to planning? And get on this out the way before it gets to.
If they
town
make a
board?
recommendation tonight,
They make a recommendation to.
But if we
table it.
recommended to table it, it would
Table it.
delay it a month.
sure. I think that's where Aaron's position of, the planning board is here to make a recommendation
Right.
for or
For or
against
against.
to the board. The board can then hear it, and if the board wishes to send it back to the planning board for further consideration, changes, et cetera, that's the direction. So I would dissuade the board from voting on a motion to table it, to have it come back, unless the applicant asks you for that credence to let them go back to the drawing board, come up with some changes per the conversation this evening, and come back, present that to you, obviously with the intention to get your favorable recommendation.
Because if we make a motion for approval or denial, either way, it still goes to the town board.
Absolutely, absolutely. That
But if
is
we table it,
normal
okay.
course. What could be a sidestep here is if the applicant quite literally asks you or says, we would like to come back to see you in 1 month, let us, work on the things that you told us tonight, then you could take a motion to table or whatever verb is correct, to do that, to have that kind of alternative action. But again, that would be the applicant's intention to seek your recommendation of approval if they feel that they're not going to get that this evening.
Okay. You feel comfortable asking the applicant if they?
That's up to them. I mean,
Okay.
I think, that's up to them if they, that's what you're saying. It's up to them to voluntarily,
That's my
Request.
advice.
The applicant wouldn't need to ask us. I think, yes.
Okay.
and if they don't want to ask us, then.
Then we can go ahead
make a
and-
motion, then we have no choice but to make a motion.
We have to motion one way or
The
the other.
motion one way, well, yeah.
Or deny, it still goes to the board either way.
Okay, that's, yeah. All right, I understand the process. Okay,
It could be a little volleyball with.
yeah.
I think one quick question, Michael, for the ingress egress, we had one entrance exit on this one. Didn't we have something we were looking at to have two on every subdivision going forward? I'm not
Right.
sure what the TIAs, at that 171 pages of TIA,
Sure,
I didn't
sure.
review detail. Just curious on this
When
one.
we went down that whole road of,
did.
when does, in the town of Rolesville, when does a second required means of public ingress egress trigger? The answer that I recall was there is none, that the town does not have ordinance adoption for something like that. Other places I personally worked.
Looks like
had that-
this
had
is
those
eventually
thresholds.
going to tie into Universal Drive possibly with that northern.
The road network they're showing here clearly shows that intention. I don't know if it was made clear in either presentation, but Universal is a private access easement shared by a whole host of properties up there. It is not a public road currently. So it would take an act of all those property owners to come together, dedicate right-of-way to that to be a public right-of-way, then improvements, either by a developer or the town, could occur. But right now, it's a, well, you see the private street or private road, and I believe it's in a gravel condition for some or all of it. So that's the state of Universal. But should that ever come into public right-of-way, this subdivision is ready to connect to it.
Right, okay.
So are you 100% sure on the two? Because I know we
On-
had several conversations about the means of getting in and out of a community.
Sure. That's my recollection of how the conversation ended, was that the town of Rolesville does not have like a compulsory, if you go over this many dwelling units, that there has to be a second means of in and out for single-family or townhome development.
And that, like many of the things being discussed tonight, could be policy changes that we can look at and consider amendments to the ordinance to align with the things that you're wanting and seeing. But as it stands right now, this is how the LDO is stating, and, you know, as the applicant said, they're meeting these goals and that sort of thing. But, you know, two entrances, does that make sense? Do we need to consider amendments and things like that?
Right. And Wake County Fire Department is on the technical review committee, and that was not a topic that I recall came up. It kind of obviously would be a major sticking point for this design. But again, things like that are also get vetted at the preliminary subdivision plat, the next stage of development, should the rezoning get approved. So, you know, there's no way to get out of that. If Wake County requires that as a fire code requirement, they'll require it, and this developer will have to figure out a way to get that other means of egress, ingress out.
Thank you.
All right.
I believe the applicant's still deliberating their option right now.
All right.
We went back in that conversation 2 or 3 times because walk-ins were
Mr. Morris, would you
had electrical fire.
like to weigh in on the item
Yes.
tabling? Or
After some discussion, you know, just going through some of the comments made by the board members and about, like you all said, what changes, if any, would we see if we were to table the case and come back? Given the current plan, we don't imagine there would be really any substantial material changes to the case. We believe, you know, we received a recommendation of approval from staff and that we are consistent with all relevant towns' adopted policies. Therefore, we'd go ahead and request to move forward with a vote tonight. We are absolutely happy to commit publicly to talking to the northern landowners on Jonesville Road between now and moving forward about extending that sidewalk and bringing that up as part of the conversation with the Board of Commissioners. And we'd also be happy to commit publicly to an additional neighborhood meeting with a slightly expanded radius in order to ensure that all stakeholders are involved, are making sure that they're involved in the case, getting notice of it. But overall, we think 1.6 units per acre, substantially lower than a lot of single-family developments you see coming through the ETJ, 2, 3, 4 units an acre. We're talking about density and traffic generation. We are substantially lower than the majority of cases that are coming through the town of Rolesville. We understand that you can't, develop that land. However, it is being permanently set aside as open space in perpetuity, ensuring that it will never be developed. And it is it would also be within the town of Rolesville. So that in and of itself, we do think that that low density is being achieved here, and that ensuring that a large swath of land is only generating a certain amount of traffic. And that when you look at the medium scale residential, future land use map designation, which encourages up to 5 units an acre in this area, a request for 1.6 is very reasonable, particularly when you look at similar cases that have been approved by the town recently. So with those aspects in mind, yeah, we are okay with moving forward with the recommendation this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, hearing that, would you like to amend your motion, or someone else want to make a motion to approve or deny?
Derek, this is all you, buddy.
Okay, fine. I'll do it. I'm not trying to. Okay, I'll make a motion.
My thunder.
I'll
You're
make
good.
a motion to deny this request. MA 2208.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion for denial and a second. All those in favor of denial?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed denial? All right, motion carried. All right.
Okay.
On to the next item is communications. Planning updates.
This evening. So I'll do the planning director's report. Previous board recommendations. On August 15th, the Town Board of Commissioners approved the Pierce Farm annexation and rezoning for that large project. There at the corners of Forestville, near Forestville and Burlington Mills. There was some tweaks to some conditions. I'm trying to think of the subject matters of some of those. It was a lot of clarification. I think it was some of the monetary donations, et cetera, for veterans and school teachers and things like that. So
Gave a
it had
house
to
for
do-
veterans.
Was this in July?
No, they
It's
did it at
August-
the town
Oh,
commissioners
August
meeting.
15th.
Yep.
They
2 weeks ago.
dedicated that, and they.
One property, right? Was it one property?
One property. And I think they did a little bit more on some park stuff in there.
Right, there were some clarifications on the drawings about the greenways, exactly where they were going to go, up around that park site in the upper right-hand corner, et cetera. So yeah, there were some revisions to the concept plan, I believe, but not sea changes from in any way from what the version that you all saw and made a recommendation.
Oh, and they, on my point of drainage, they agreed to spot elevations on every lot before they actually did any plans. So they could do a 2% grade with that. So that was a good
Right.
move right there to get the.
I think that means
the
they'll
drainage.
kind of plateau each lot
Yes.
with grading in mind prior to home building starting versus
Hmm.
leaving it kind of natural, and then when they start to do the foundation, they all.
It's kind of what they did in Jones,
a little more.
in the preserves at Jones Dairy, right? Didn't they do that there?
Mm-hmm. But they're gonna have it so the developer has to stay within those spot elevations to
Okay.
keep the grades correct. Try to get the drainage to work on the small
Yeah.
lots,
Right. So that, you're correct, sir. That was a.
which is above the LDO's requirements and the zoning requirements.
Might be a good
and-
amendment.
And on September 5th, next week, the Hills at Harris Creek rezoning annexation and that associated text amendment and the senior living facility known as Arden, it was known by the address 4724 Burlington Mills, that map amendment, annexation, and text amendment related to that use, those are all moving forward to the town board. And so those were two that you heard, I believe, last month. So they're moving forward, so no further action. But both of them are very much the same projects that you saw. There are no major changes that I recall with that, minus some tweaks to the condition language, that is all. So both of those are moving forward. The July development report was in your packet there. I think big picture, we had 18 single-family detached permits issued. Looks like maybe one townhome. Yes, a total 19 dwelling unit permits, and almost 100 total permits. So that's trades and other accessory structures, et cetera, things of that nature. You can read those graphs on page 3. And as I shared with Mr. Verstegen, I think there's some overhaul of the presentation of information in this report that we can do moving forward. And then on the back, this is actually month 2 for a little bit of reorganization of all the big projects that are working its way through either rezonings, annexations, like you all make recommendations on the legislative materials, or administrative preliminary plats, final plats, site plans for non-residential, things of that nature. So hopefully that's a nice way to capture it. And again, we'll be moving projects off of this as they get their full certificates of occupancy.
I replied to the last email, right? I think I
Yes.
did, right? So- Okay, I just want to make sure I didn't owe you another email, so.
Nope,
So I think yeah, okay, thanks.
Yep. So that's the development report from July. And I had nothing else this evening, so I'll turn it over to Town Attorney.
Nothing to report from town attorney.
There's no other business at this time. One thing that I think Meredith or I was going to try to ask you all is, would you like to look forward for another training session, like the one that we had 4 months ago or something? If we could maybe look at that towards the November or December time. if you're open and willing to do that. we can
Always
find
open to
another-
learning.
Okay. So we can look for another, maybe 6 o'clock. We'll get you some food. We'll work from 6 to 7 in a work session for just general education points with all of us, and then, have the meeting.
Yeah.
So we'll look
I
for
agree.
that.
I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
Yep.
Next month is a very big month. You're going to be seeing some stuff come out. Michelle's been working very hard on this. It's the 50th anniversary of the Planning Commission as a advisory board for the town. Apparently, it was created in about September of 1973.
It's a big deal.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah. Right. So we're going to have some presentation, extra special presentation. We'll be doing some publicity through the town website and so forth, Wake TV, et cetera, just to kind of promote that. And I think October is National Planning Month every year. So we're going to tie that in, and we'll stop at a few, we'll get it kicked off a few days early before October.
Okay.
So we'll kind of play that up, I think, here in end of September into October. So that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Is there any other business anyone has?
I do not, Mr. Chairman.
All right, hearing none, we'll move on to item number 4, adjournment. Is there a motion for adjournment?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
All right, have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second. You got
Let
it.
me say something.
Yeah, sorry.
All right, have a motion and a second. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. We are adjourned.
Thank you, team.
Thank you.